Hello everyone, how are you? My name is Gizem. Nice to meet you all. I'm seeing familiar names. Welcome back. You can use the chat box to answer me, or you can unmute yourself and speak. Hello, good evening. Are you guys good? Hello. Good to see you back. Let me share my screen really quickly, and then we can start. Yes. I think you can see my screen. Yes. Let's start. So today we will talk about writing task 2. As you can see on the screen, we have these band descriptors, which is basically how IELTS examiners score your writing. So, for example, you have 4 different band scores. So the first one is according to your task response, and the second one is according to your coherence and cohesion. The third one is about lexical resource, which is just a fancy way of saying vocabulary. And the last one is your grammatical range and accuracy. And according to these 4 criteria, you get a band. For example, for band 9, you need to fully address all parts of the task, present a fully developed position in answer to the question with relevant, fully extended, and well-supported ideas, for example. And yeah, so these go like this. You can find this anywhere because this is publicly given by IELTS. Any questions about the band scoring before we start? Today we will focus on the task 2, the second task of IELTS writing, and we will specifically look at descriptive essays. But before we do that, let's talk about these criteria a bit. So for example, to get a good grade, a good band score for the task achievement, you need to answer the question, understand the question type. You need to make your position or opinion clear if it's asked. You need to use the correct essay structure, which is an introduction, 2 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. And you need to write more than 250 words. This is said like 250 words, but you're advised to write around 300 words. There is no upper word limit in IELTS writing task 2, but the more you write, the more grammatical mistakes you might make. So it's not advised to write more than 350 words, because you will have some time to check your answers, your essay, after you write. And to use that time accurately, you need to have around 300 words to check all the grammatical mistakes that you make and then correct them. Let's move on to coherence and cohesion. For this part, you need to plan your essay as a whole. You need to show the examiner that you have an essay plan. Then you need to give good examples and provide some evidences for your arguments. And you need to be consistent throughout the essay. So for example, let's say if the question asks, is global warming good or bad, let's say, you shouldn't write one paragraph about the good sides of it and the second paragraph as the bad sides of it, because that shows no consistency, right? So you need to be consistent. If you say something is good, then you need to always write that it's good with examples. For the lexical resource, as I've said, this is just a fancy way of saying vocabulary. To get a good band score in lexical resource, you need to use a wide range of vocabulary, and you can have some rare minor errors in terms of using those different vocabularies, but then again, it should not be that much so that it affects your score. And you need to show that you have a wide range of vocabulary and you need to be precise with it, use synonyms where possible, and you need to realize that some words don't have direct synonyms. So you can try to rewrite those sentences, because paraphrasing is a really important part of IELTS writing. And you need to paraphrase where you can to show the examiner that you have that paraphrasing skills. And while doing this, you need to try to use some uncommon words related to the subject. Any word that you use, if it can be said grammatically, more grammatically, you should use it in a more grammatical way to get a good score like band 9 or 8 or 7, 7.5. You need to show the examiner that you know some uncommon academic words that are not used on a daily basis. And that will get you a good band score in terms of lexical resource. And for the last one, you need to have a good grammatical range and accuracy, which means that you need to write both simple and compound and complex sentences, which can be like an idea and another idea connected to one another. For example, with and, for, yet, but, so, or nor. Or you should use complex sentences, which can be summarized with these, with linking words such as after or whether or since or even though. You need to show the examiner that you can form complex sentences with ease and accurately. And you need to show the examiner also that you know a wide range of linking words. For example, if you write although once, then you should write even though, which is a synonym for although, to show the examiner that you know how to use the synonyms of the linking words as well, because then the examiner will know that you have a wide range of grammatical knowledge, right? And another way to show the examiner that you have a wide range of grammatical knowledge is to use passive sentences, or question sentences, or conditional sentences, using modal verbs and if, for example. Because in that way, the examiner can, again, see that you have a wide range of grammatical knowledge. Now, does anyone have any questions regarding to the band score and how it's given, or any of the details that we've mentioned? For example, do you know how to use these complex sentences, linking words? Is there anything that you don't know in this table, for example? You can use the chat box or you can raise your hand and I will give you permission to speak, to unmute yourself. All right, if there are no questions, then let's move on to our essay. So, as I've said, we will talk about discussion essays today, which is a part of the second task in IELTS writing. And in this part, you will have a question like this. And you're advised to spend around 40 minutes on this task. You're given a total of 60 minutes for the writing task as a whole. And you need to spend around 20 minutes on task 1 and 40 minutes on this one, because the second task of IELTS writing gives you more credit, more score in terms of scoring. So you should spend around 40 minutes on this one, because this is also rather longer than the essay that we write in task 1. So yeah, you should spend around 40 minutes and you need to write about this topic given to you. The essay question will be presented just like this in the exam. So you can consider this as part of your IELTS writing practice, for example. And it's really good that if you write a practice essay for this question, and then you can compare it with the essay that we're going to read today, and you can find out how you would score by yourself. You can examine that by yourself, comparing the two band scores that we will have today. So, our essay topic is this. Some people believe that it is best to accept a bad situation, such as an unsatisfactory job or shortage of money. Others argue that it is best to try and improve such situations. And in discussion essays, you're asked to discuss both of these views and give your opinion. And you need to be consistent while doing that too. So that's the challenging part of discussion essays. You need to discuss both views, but you need to have a clear opinion that you need to give and present in your essay. And the question goes, give reasons for your answer and include any relevant examples from your own knowledge or experience. And again, you're required to write at least 250 words, but we aim for 300. Any questions about this question? All right, let's talk about how we write the essay. As we've said, the first thing that you need to write is an introduction, where you need to just paraphrase the given topic sentence. So the topic sentence is included in the question, which is the information given to you in the question. So this bit that we've just read. And in the introduction, you need to paraphrase this, and you don't need to do anything else. Then you will need to give a thesis statement, but that's not important at this point. So let's paraphrase this together. Can you write a paraphrase of this right now in the chat box? Or you can just unmute yourself and talk to me. Give me the paraphrased version of this. And we will do one together too. A paraphrased version of this. These two sentences, these two information given to us. It would be really good practice if you wrote it on chat. So I will wait maybe for 30 seconds. And then we will read our own paraphrased version of this introduction. All right. Does anyone want to try? And don't worry if you make mistakes. You will make mistakes, both during this class, and I will make some mistakes too. And you will make some mistakes in your IELTS exam as well. What's important is that we learn from those mistakes, right? So it's better to make those mistakes and try to find out what our mistakes are, and then we can correct it by ourselves later on too, which is again a really good practice. All right, let's try to paraphrase it together. So, what do you think you can use instead of such as? So, such as is basically to give an example, right? So, for example, here it says a bad situation, and what can we use instead of such as here? Yes, we can use for instance. Do you think we can use these too? For example or like? For example, yes, we can use for example too. Do you think we can use like? Can we use like? You're not so sure, I guess. Yes, your answers are correct. We cannot use like, because yes, it's informal. It's kind of informal. Like the word kinda. Kinda is also informal too. And it's also not so correct here because this does not usually give an example. I mean, they use it daily. It's not so wrong in terms of daily usage, but in IELTS academic writing, we need to use more academic versions of these. So, such as, or for example, or for instance, are better versions of using such as or giving examples. But if we use for example or for instance, we might sometimes change the structure of the sentence too, right? So, for example, we might use a comma and another sentence after that. And the same goes for instance too. So, yeah, make sure that you use the linking words that you use or conjunctions that you use grammatically correct, because even a comma or a dot really changes everything in IELTS academic writing. You need to use those correctly as well. Any questions about this? Uh, Someone said something, few individual for some people, paraphrase. So for some people, instead of some people, you're asking if we can use few individuals. Yes, we can, but you need to use individuals instead of just individual because it's plural, right? Few is plural, gets a plural word after it. So we need to say few individuals. And I think that's a good way of saying some people, but you can also just say some instead of some people, because some and others, they can be used on their own as well. They don't need another word after it. So we can just say some too. But few individuals is, again, yes, a good way of paraphrasing this. Any other questions about this paraphrasing topic that we're doing? All right. Then let's talk about what we can use to express a contrast. Do you know what a contrast is? So basically, a contrast is something that contradicts each other. So, for example, here, the first sentence, uh, in the first sentence, some people think that it's best to accept a bad situation. So they're doing something maybe positive for some people. But others say that, I think it's more positive, say that we need to improve those situations rather than accepting it, right? So these contradict each other. These are not the same. There are two different parts of a discussion. So they contradict each other. They're in contrast. What do you think we can use to express a contrast? Yes, we can use on the other hand. Yes, you're both correct. Yes, we can use in contrast as well. Do you think we can use although or however? However, yes. Yes. A lot of you missed although. Do you think we cannot use although instead of while giving a contrast? Um, there's a difference of opinion. There's a contrast in terms of whether we can use although or not. We can use although too, because although, though, and even though, which are all synonyms, also give a contrast. They give, like, for example, although I've studied a lot, I failed in the exam. So, in this sentence, although I have studied a lot, I failed in the exam, we can see that the two situations contradict each other, right? Studying a lot, but still failing. And since we can use it there, since we can use although, we can use it to give a contradiction. Any questions about this, about the contrast? All right. Let's move on to conjunctions that we can use to link two sentences. As we have said, we can use although to link two sentences because, as we have said, although I have studied a lot, I failed in the exam, connects two sentences together, right? So we can use although to connect two sentences. What about others? Can we use whereas or while to link sentences? Yes, we can use while and whereas too, others too, definitely. Because they both, again, connect two sentences to one another. And whereas gives that contrast too. So, for example, you can say some people like the option A, whereas others like the option B. So, whereas is actually a really good linking word that we can use to connect these two sentences together because they also talk about a contrast too, right? So, whereas, because it connects two sentences and because it gives a contrast, is very good to use here. And we can use while synonymously to whereas as well. But while also has that meaning in which there is not necessarily a contrast. But you can just say, while I'm talking, my students are listening, for example. So the two events happening at the same time, while can connect those two sentences. Any questions so far? All right. Now, let's look at that paraphrase together. So, we found out a lot of things that we can use in while connecting these two sentences and paraphrasing them, right? So, let's do the paraphrasing together. I hope you help me with this because it's better for you, a better practice for you, um, to actually paraphrase something, to be better at paraphrasing. So, instead of some people, as we have said, we can just say some, or we can say few individuals, which is correct too. Or we can also say a few individuals, which is also correct. But there's a difference of meaning there. So, for example, when we say a few, we don't mean that much. But while saying some, we have a little more than that, a few people. So we can say some. And what can we say instead of believe, for example? And it doesn't necessarily have to be the same thing. So, for example, we don't have to give that believe meaning. We can also say something like think or argue or claim or maybe point out. Yes, definitely. We can say think too. Let's try to use something that might not come up to our minds that easily. So, for example, do you know the word assert? Do you know what assert means? Heard of it? Yes. Assert basically is a synonym for claim. So we can say instead of believe, we can say some assert that. And we don't need to change everything too, right? So it says that, and we can use that too because it's a correct way of linking those two sentences together. So we can say some assert that. What can we say instead of it is best to accept a bad situation? Yes, we're using assert instead of believe, but we can also say, let's write that too, are of the opinion that, which is again a not so common word um, is to use instead of believe. So we can say some assert that or some are of the opinion that. Both are correct, whichever one you prefer. And what can we say instead of it is best to accept a bad situation? If you're having trouble paraphrasing that sentence only, you can just make it a passive voice. You can use it in the passive voice, and then it's better than to use it just as it is. Because in the introduction part, they try to find out how you paraphrase things if you have paraphrasing skills. So if you don't know how to paraphrase something, you can make it use it in the passive voice. So, for example, you can say, a bad situation is best accepted, for example. Should be accepted. Yes, bad situations should be accepted. We can say tolerate a bad situation, put up with a bad situation, to live with a bad situation, or we can write circumstances, yes, instead of situation. Thank you so much for all your answers. Let's use one of them. We can say, let's say, people need to, let's say, put up with, because it's a phrasal verb, I chose that one. Put up with adverse circumstances. Do you know the word adverse? Adverse is, again, an academic and fancy way of saying bad. It's basically the same thing. So, whenever you want to paraphrase the word bad, you can use the synonym adverse. It's exactly the same and it's used exactly the same. So, it's, I think, rather easy to use because while we're writing an essay, we usually tend to write the words good and bad. So, it's usually really helpful to know easy synonyms for the words good and bad. And instead of bad, you can easily write adverse, which is really, really good. And I chose put up with because that's a phrasal verb. And using a phrasal verb shows the examiner, again, that you have a wide range of vocabulary. So we can say put up with instead of saying just accept. Let's say. So we said people need to put up with adverse circumstances. Unwelcome situations, yes, that's also true, but there's a spelling mistake there. And that's good to know right now that even if we miss one simple letter, let's say we write circumstance instead of circumstances, then again, the examiner will know if we do them too much, the examiner will know that we have some problems with spelling English words. So we need to pay attention to those as well. Has someone unmuted themselves? Do you have any questions? Or was that by mistake? If that was by mistake, I'm continuing. Yeah, typo. I know. I know it's a typo. It mostly is because when it's a computer-based exam, especially, we have a lot of typos. I do them all the time too. That's why we need to check our essay after we've finished writing it, because even those typos, if there are too many of them, can lose you some significant points. All right, let's paraphrase such as an unsatisfactory job or shortage of money. How can we incorporate those to our essay, such as an unsatisfactory job or shortage of money? I want to show you another way of using such as. So for example, we can use such as like this, but we can also use it like this, with such adverse circumstances as. So you can use such as together as a whole, or you can take the noun that is the group of your examples. You can take that noun and put it between the words such and as, which is again another way of using such as. And even if you have not changed that such as grammar thing, then again, the examiner will know that you know how to use such as differently than the one that is presented to you. So if you cannot at that moment think of anything to replace such as, you can just basically use it like this: such adverse circumstances as. For instance, undesirable occupation and unacceptable. Yes, we can say undesirable occupation, but we can also use some relative clauses here too. How do you think we can use relative clauses here? How do we say unsatisfactory job with changing the grammatical structure as well? Because as we have said, paraphrasing is also changing the grammatical structure as much as we can too. And we have not really changed the grammatical structure of this sentence just yet. So let's try to change it in these examples. So for example, we can say an occupation, which does not give, let's say, satisfaction. Or instead of give, we can say provide, let's say, a satisfactory wage. And at this point, as you can see, we've paraphrased both a satisfactory job and a shortage of money, basically. So we've kind of brought them together with just one example. Or we could say position of employment, yes. Or we could say feeling. Where could we use feeling? Hmm. I'm not quite sure where we could use feeling. Unsatisfactory feeling. Oh, unsatisfactory feeling. Yes, we could have used it, but then we would have to explain it further to make it closer to a job or money, for example. So we could say unsatisfactory feelings regarding one's job or one's wage, for example. That would, again, give the same meaning. So that would be good, yes. And we could use the others as well. Thank you so much. Now, let's connect these two sentences by using whereas, because as we have said, this gives a contrast, right? So since we're writing a contradictory statement, let's use whereas and let's learn how to use it as well. So it says, others argue that it's better to try and improve such situations. So let's not change others because it's not necessary to, right? Because others is others. We can say other things, like we can say other people, or we can say the remaining people or something, but that would be kind of forced, and we don't need to do that really. So we can say others. What can we say instead of argue? Let's use assert at the beginning and are of the opinion for others. What do you think? Are of the opinion that. We can say debate or insist, sorry, opinion. Let me answer that question first. How many sentences should include a paragraph? In the introduction paragraph, we can write only 2 sentences and that will be okay. But for other paragraphs, we will talk in a minute. But for this one, for example, we have 2 introductory statements. So we can write up to 4 sentences in the introduction paragraph. And yes, we can say disagree too. It's also okay. Let's continue. How can we say it is better to try and improve such situations? So we can say, what can we say instead of improve? Can we use the word enhance? Do you know what it means? Yes, we can use enhance. It's basically a synonym for improve. We can say enhancing that situation or enhancing that situation, or I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, yeah, we can say changing that for the better, right? Both are synonyms of saying enhancing, improving. We cannot exactly use increase here because there's nothing to increase. So increase basically means, let's say if I have one pencil, I will have three pencils and I will have an increase. Increase means that. But improving does not necessarily mean an increase in the amount of something. Improving can just be the same amount of something, but in a better way. So that's why we cannot use increase, but we can say change for the better, or we can say enhancing a situation. And what can we say instead of try? It's not really necessary too, but we can say, what can we say instead of try? Yes, Samir, Rana, whichever you prefer. You can speak. I think you raised your hand, but was that by mistake? Let's ask to speak. Yes? Was that by mistake? All right, let's continue then. Um, yeah, so basically, this is how one way of paraphrasing this sentence, but you can also come up with other paraphrase versions, which are all okay, because you don't have one way of paraphrasing something too, right? So you can say different things. Yes, Shreya.
Yeah, ma'am. Like you've written in the last sentence that others are the opinion that enhancing. Shouldn't we use those situations or enhancing the situations maybe?
Yeah, we can do that too. So you mean like this, right? This, right? Plural versions of them. And
Yeah,
actually,
because we are talking about two situations in the like the first sentence, so maybe that will sound more perfect
yes,
according to me.
yes, and it's actually really better than the one that I've used. I did not really pay attention to the singular and plural versions of those, and that was really good of you to catch. Thank you so much. Because yes, as Shreya have said, we have two or maybe more situations here, so we cannot use. It's better to use those situations instead of that situation because it's plural, right? That was so much better. Thank you so much. Any questions about the paraphrasing or the introduction right now? All right. And for the introduction, after we have paraphrased that information given to us, we need to position ourselves, position our essay, and we need to write one sentence, a thesis statement, on what we will discuss throughout that essay. Now, let's talk about that. So, for example, this is an essay, an example essay, which is predicted to get a band 9 in the exam, and it's for the same question. Now, let's read the introduction only and see how we've paraphrased it and how we give our thesis statement, our opinion. So, for this part, we have said some believe that it's important to be accepting of negative circumstances when they occur, whereas others emphasize that it's better to try to seek solutions in such situations. So, it's kind of similar to what we've done, but not so much again. So, instead of some people believe, we just say some believe. And we say it is best, and in the essay we say it's important to be accepting of negative circumstances when they occur, whereas others emphasize that it's better to try to seek solutions. So seek solutions basically mean um, try to find solutions inside situations. And this essay discusses both perspectives because the question asks us to discuss both these views, right? Both perspectives, and why I believe that the arguments for seeking solutions are stronger. So, when you look at this introduction and this thesis statement, what do you think the essay will be about? So, what do you think is the position of the writer of this essay? Does does he or she support the first position or the second one? Seeking solutions, yes. The second one, definitely. So, because it says here, this essay discusses why I believe that the arguments for seeking solutions are stronger, we understand from that last sentence that the writer is more of the opinion agreeing with the second argument, right? So trying to find an improvement to those situations. So, in your essay, when the examiner reads your essay, they need to understand from the last sentence of your introduction the position that you're going to take throughout that essay. This is a really, really, really important part of your task 2 essay. So, to repeat myself, what you need to do in the introduction is to first paraphrase that sentence, that information given to you, and answer the question in the second or last sentence of your introduction. You need to give those positions that you take really clearly and directly. You don't need to kind of make a show out of it. What this thesis statement asks from you, is to see your position, basically. And it's, again, the really, really important part of this essay. Any questions about the introduction in general before we move on to the body paragraphs? Yes, Fairy.
Ma'am,
Hey.
uh, actually, I want to ask about the thesis statement which you have written over here. This essay discuss both perspective. This is important. And the second line in the statement that why I believe that the argument for seeking solution is more important or stronger or not. Is this important line?
Yes, definitely. It's actually the more important part of this. And it's actually the more important part of this because the question not only asks us to discuss both of these views, but also wants us to give our own opinion. So this is actually the more important part because this is a discussion essay and we need to give our opinion too.
But in some cases I'm also learning somewhere else. So I heard that this will not affect the question, even though this will deficit your essay, that the argument what we written in the second line, why I believe that argument for seeking solution are stronger. This shouldn't be right over here, or I heard that. Is it true or wrong?
Hmm. So there are basically different types of essays. This one is the discussion essay, and it asks us to give our opinion, so we must write it. But there are some
Okay.
other essay types, for example, let's say cause and effect essay, where you don't need to give your opinion because the question does not ask for your opinion.
If it is not written as a discussion essay, this is
Mhm.
discussion essay, and it's all about it's also asking our opinion, so that's why we have written over here.
Yeah,
And if they don't ask that, just discuss both of the sides, so we don't have to mention the our plan to the writer.
not really, no, yeah. So basically, if the question asks for you to give your opinion, you have to include that. But if you
or
don't,
in the
you don't have
end
to do it. In
or
the
in the end we have to do at any cost.
in the conclusion, you mean?
Yes.
We will talk about
Yeah.
it in a second.
Okay, okay, okay.
There was
Thank
another
you.
question yesterday. Yeah? No worries.
Yeah. So now, should we also include some general statements to enhance our lines for the introductory passage, or should we just go with the uh, paraphrasing or something like using synonyms and then just giving our thesis?
Definitely the second one, because when we memorize something just to show off, like those sentences that you say sorry, to impress the examiners usually know that they're just memorized sections of your essay. Because we have read so many of those essay, we kind of know which ones are memorized and which ones really show your English. So if you just write some things to enhance that paragraph with different grammatical words, sorry, grammatical things or different vocabulary, then the examiner usually knows that it's memorized, so they don't usually give any points for that. Just paraphrasing the statement and giving your answer to the question, writing your thesis statement is more than enough. As you can see, this one, for example, gets a band 9 for this introduction. So you don't need to enhance anything at this point. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
No worries. All right. Any other questions before we move on to the body paragraphs? All right, good. Let's continue then. So, we have to organize our body paragraphs in a logical way, right? And we need to discuss both views too in the discussion essay. What we can do in the discussion essays is to present the two versions of those arguments as two separate paragraphs. So, for example, in the first body paragraph, we can write about the first view. So, some people believe that it's best to accept a bad situation. We can talk about that in the first paragraph, and we can talk about the other point of view in the second body paragraph, which is, I think, a really good way of organizing this discussion essay. And you can use that for all discussion essays, because in discussion essays, you usually have two contrasting points of views, and you are usually asked to discuss those opinions and give your opinion too. So you can always use these outline as an essay outline for you. So, for example, you have written your introduction. You want to organize your essay in a logical way, so you can use the first paragraph to talk about the first point of view, and the second body paragraph to talk about the second point of view. And in the last paragraph, in the conclusion, we will talk about our points of view, because again, the question asks for our opinion, right? Now, let's read the body paragraphs. So, for the first body paragraph, we say there are two main reasons why people believe that we must be accepting of bad circumstances. First of all, we often cannot avoid bad situations. Since these situations can't always be avoided, it is best to just accept the reality. For instance, economic downturns can lead to the company we work for going bankrupt, and in this case, we should not feel hard done by if we lose our job. In addition, unnecessary stress can be caused by dwelling on our current circumstances. If we're accepting of our circumstances, this can allow us to maintain a positive mood and continue enjoying our life despite a setback. So, what do you think makes this paragraph a really good essay? And is there anything that you don't understand? So, for example, I see Shreya writing hard done by with a question mark, which is saying something. Sorry, someone unmuted themselves. I will give you permission to speak in a second. Until that time, please unmute yourself. Sorry, mute yourself. Thank you so much. So, hard done by basically means we're done. So, I'm emotionally and physically overwhelmed. It means that. So, it means that we're feeling bad, to put it simply. Any other things that you don't understand or want to point out because this is good or not, let's say. And someone unmuted themselves, so before, you can unmute yourself now and ask any questions or give any comments that you want to make. I think it was Rajesh. Am I pronouncing it correctly? I'm sorry if I pronounce any of your names incorrectly. You can correct me. Yes? If not, I will give permission to speak to Fairy, who has raised their hand. That was by mistake. Okay, no worries.
Hello.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I want to ask one thing. In the last of the body paragraph one, we don't have to we don't have to write the conclusion of the paragraph, or just we left back means we don't just present our views and leave it all the things, or we have to conclude in the last of the paragraph.
It's actually up to you. If you want, you can write a conclusory, like briefly sentence. But if you don't want to do that, you don't have to do that too. It kind of works as a way of showing the examiner that you're not off the topic. So it's good to write it, but if you're already confident with what you've written and you don't need that contradictory statement, then you don't have to do it basically. So, for example,
Okay.
if we have written a briefly sentence here, then we would exceed 300 words more than that, right? So we would write more than that. So we don't need that. And this paragraph is really explanatory in itself. So it's not necessary. But if you feel like you need that statement, then you can write it. There's no setbacks, there's no negative sides to writing that
Oh,
statement.
okay, okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Sure, no worries. Any other questions? Is it okay to use contractions like can't and isn't? Um, it's not actually. You should write cannot or it is. But because this is just an example essay, we're trying to include some mistakes that you can make during the exam. So, for example, can't or it's or are there any others? Yes, it's here too. They're actually not okay in an academic mistake. You need to not shorten anything. So you cannot use contractions. But because this essay is really good in terms of other things, so for example, it shows the examiner that this person knows a wide range of vocabulary and this person knows a lot of grammatical structures, like different ones, and can use them. This essay gets still a band 9, even though it uses contractions. So I advise you to not to write them, just to not risk anything. Uh, but yeah, if your essay as a whole is that good, it's not really that important if if you've used contradictions in one or two sentences. All right. Any other questions? All right. Why do you think this paragraph is good? Let's talk about that. So I should start while you're writing your answers or raising your hands. So the first sentence of this paragraph shows again the examiner that we're talking about two main reasons why people believe some people think that we should accept our bad situations, right? So when we read this sentence, we know what this paragraph is going to talk about, which is a topic sentence, which is the first sentence of your body paragraphs. And it really shows the examiner that we're organized and we know what we will write before we write it. So it's a really good way of showing that you can use your time limits and English uh, to write an academic organized essay. So then it uses the correct linking word, correct conjunction, saying first of all, and then gives the first argument, right? And then this person gives an explanation as to why this is the case. And it's not even left at that, it gives an instance, an example in terms of how this is accurate, right? So it really proves to us that this is a valid argument of why people think that we should accept our bad circumstances. So it gives valid details and they're not off the topic, they're related to the subject. So while writing your body paragraphs, you need to always keep in mind that you need to give explanations and examples to any argument that you make. So you cannot just say, we cannot avoid bad situations, and think that the examiner will know what you're going to write next, so you can skip it. Basically, you need to imagine that the examiner does not know anything on that topic. So you need to explain everything one by one to that person. And to do that, you can always ask yourself two questions: why and how. So, for example, let's imagine that you're in the exam and you wrote the sentence, we often cannot avoid bad situations. That's kind of self explanatory, right? So, since we cannot avoid bad situations, we can accept them, right? But the examiner still wants to see it. So, we can ask ourselves how we cannot avoid that situation, so we should accept it. Or you can say why not avoiding that situation means that we should accept it. So you're right, since these situations can't be avoided, it's just best to accept reality and say, let's say economic downturns can lead to the company we work for going bankrupt. So we cannot do anything about that. So we need to accept it. We shouldn't feel hard done by, right? Good vocabulary and appropriate. I don't know what appropriate is a comment to, but yes, this essay has a lot of good vocabulary. For example, hard done by, going bankrupt, avoid economic downturn. Oh, and if appropriate means that this essay, this example is appropriate for that argument, yes, that's a correct comment. All right. And again, the second reason why people think we should accept those situations, those circumstances, is again explained in a correct version and in detail, right? So that's why this paragraph is good and is predicted to get a band 9. Now, if you don't have any further questions, let's move on to the other side of our argument, other side that we need to discuss in this essay. Um, Dwelling. I don't know if I've asked something and I forgot it because I don't know what dwelling refers to. Sorry. You can unmute yourself and speak, by the way.
I wanted to know the meaning of dwelling in respect to the passage.
Ah,
Like
okay.
it's in the second last one, yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Yeah, it really connects the argument with correct examples, and it gives a clear side, a clear argument without losing that consistency, right? All right, let's move on to the second one. So, something that is really important in discussion essays is that we need to use the correct linking word while moving forward to the second part of the discussion. So, for example, because these two arguments contradict each other, we use the word however, the linking word however, which shows a contradiction, right? As we have talked about in the previous part of this class. So we can say, however, others argue that we should have a proactive attitude and find solutions to any negative predicament. The main benefit of this approach is that it may lead to eustress, which helps us to which helps to motivate us to find solutions. For instance, if we lose our job, we should focus on finding a new job to solve the problem of being unemployed. Additionally, focusing on solutions can divert some of our negative emotions, such as a feeling of bad luck or guilt, into more positive emotions, such as feelings of empowerment or in our ability to solve our problems. So, because this paragraph, the second paragraph, talks about solutions to those, this paragraph is again dwelling on those positive things, like the solutions to that bad situation. So, in the first sentence, again, we have our topic sentence, which says what we will discuss throughout that paragraph. So we should have a proactive attitude according to others. And then the writer explains why we should find solutions. So it says the main benefit is this and that, and gives again a clear example where we have that benefit. And then, while moving to the second reason, second benefit of focusing on a solution is that we can divert our negative emotions to positive ones, right? And again, we know that we're moving on to another reason for finding solutions. So that's why we say additionally, like we say in addition. What do you think we could have used instead of additionally or in addition? Do you know any academic words? Yes, we can use moreover in the chat box. Furthermore, yes, definitely. Those are really good replacements, really good synonyms of in addition and additionally, and they're used in the same way as in addition and additionally. So, yes, we can use both of them. A part of it and on top of that, along with that. We can use along with that too and on top of that too, but a part of it kind of yes, it adds to it, but it's included in the previous argument too. So a part of it can sometimes be a synonym for those, but not always. So I would suggest using more risk-free alternatives like moreover or furthermore. And along with that or on top of that are synonyms too, but there are rather longer ways of saying the same thing too, right? And that's not really an academic way of doing it. So for example, if we write on top of that, instead of additionally, the examiner might think that we're just cheating our way on writing more words to meet that writing, to meet that word limit. So, writing on top of that or along with that, since they're longer, might tell the examiner that we're just cheating to write more words. So, using moreover or furthermore or in addition or additionally are usually better. All right, let's move on to the yes, Shreya.
Ma'am, I've heard that we should not use like subjective pronouns like we, you, he or she. So, like, is there something like that?
So, because this essay again asks our opinion, we can use we or I or whatever, something like that. But it's better to again go risk free and write other things like one or those who or individuals or people, because again they are risk free options. But if you're writing so good that we or I does not really change anything, then you can use it. But in this essay, because the question asks for your opinion, you have to use I.
All right, thank you.
Sure, no worries. And yeah, again, I wouldn't, for example, use we if I wanted to write an essay that's not too risky, because sometimes when I'm writing really fast, I might not think of those different words too, right? So, for example, I might not come up with hard done by during the exam due to the stress too, right? Even if we know that word or phrasal verb by heart, we might not sometimes think of them because we're trying to write really fast. So, not to risk anything, I wouldn't choose to write we if I'm taking an exam, an important exam. I would choose to write one or those two or individuals instead of that. All right, let's move on to conclusion if there are no questions. All right, so in the conclusion part, you need to just answer your part of the question, so give your opinion. But you should also summarize those two views that you have just talked about in detail. So, an example conclusion can be in conclusion, I believe both sides of the arguments have merits. However, I believe it's better to focus on finding solutions because it increases the likelihood of solving our problems and maintaining a positive mental attitude, which is far more important than the benefits of avoiding stress through being accepting of our circumstances. So, this conclusion is good because it presents the writer's opinion very clearly, and it also summarizes the two statements, the two sides of the arguments, while doing that, while presenting this person's opinion. So it does that by saying something is better, this option is better, than the other option, and still summarizing both of them in the same sentence. In the conclusion, you don't need to write more than two or a maximum of three sentences. Just two sentences are okay too, but you should not really write two or three sentences with maybe 5 words in each. So your conclusion, your sentences in the conclusion paragraph should also contain a lot of complex sentences such as which, for example, or however, because again, we want to leave a positive image in the examiner's mind, right? And the conclusion will be the last thing that the examiner will read. So to give that good impression, we need to show off our grammatical and vocabulary knowledge in the conclusion paragraph too, basically in any part of the essay too, but we shouldn't leave conclusion with really simple sentences, let's say. Any questions about the conclusion? All right. So this was a band 9 essay because it was rather good too, right? Because it had a lot of different vocabulary, different grammatical structures, a lot of paraphrased versions of saying the same things. All clear, that's really good. Now let's look at a band 7 essay. So, again, we need to paraphrase the statement in the introduction, and this is a band 7 essay, which goes, some people believe that it is best to accept a bad situation, such as an unsatisfactory job or shortage of money. Others argue that it's better to try and improve such situations. What's missing in this introduction? And I want to give that tip to you by showing the question as well. So basically, there is no paraphrased versions of the introduction, right? Of the information in the question. It just directly copies it. Yes, paraphrasing is uh, not here. So this is the first mistake that the candidate has made here. And the second thing is that it doesn't have a thesis statement. It doesn't show the side this essay we're going to take. Yes, a thesis statement. But it separates that opinion uh, as another paragraph. Let's read that. It says, based on my knowledge, some people choose to accept the fate that they have to undergo the bad situation as they believe that good things might come out of it. And their solution is simply to just go with the flow because they think they will learn something new along the journey. For example, a student received a grade B for his physics examination. However, he only needs one more mark to get an A. If a student requires to receive a mark percentage of 70% to get an A, this student got a 69% on his paper. As the teacher looked through the questions with the whole class, he notices that the teacher accidentally marked his correct answer to wrong. So, realistically, he should get an A. However, he chooses to leave his grade as a B because he believes that his current grade will be a motivation for him to improve and work harder to get a better grade in the next examination. Hence, this explains why some people chooses to accept the bad situation. So, in this part, the candidate, the student writing this paper, explained the first side of the argument in this paragraph, right? And it gave a really good detailed example, um, and really actually in detail explained this people's position. So the people who choose to accept the fate that they have to undergo. Shreya says it's too complex. Do you think the example is too complex, or the sentences are too complex? The example, yes, the example is a little bit more detailed that we want it to be. So it's like a story, basically. And writing a story in IELTS academic essay is not that great because you're not required to write a story. You're required to write an academic essay. It's exaggerated too much. Yes, it's exaggerated to prove that point, but still, it's a little bit too much. I agree with you on that. That's why this person got a band 7 instead of a band 9, for example. Because if you pay attention, um, this person uses different vocabulary too, like different words too. For example, go with the flow, right? And this person uses a lot of different grammatical structures, saying, however, something new along the journey, or have to undergo, accept the fate that I have to undergo. So there's a relative clause there. And there were other relative clauses and noun clauses there too, which I cannot find at the moment. But this person also uses a lot of different linking words. So says so, but then it continues with hence, for example. So there are a lot of good stuff there. That's why it could get a band 7, even though this essay has some mistakes. So, for example, it has some people chooses instead of some people choose. But still, since this person does not make those mistakes, such mistakes as often, and still can manage to explain himself or herself with good vocabulary and grammatical structures, it could still get a band 7. Now, let's read the other paragraph, the second paragraph. It goes, besides that, it's also mentioned that others argue that it's better to try and improve such situations. This sentence is a rather hard to read because it has a lot of that's, right? I would not do that. I would avoid doing that. But still, this is a band 7 essay. I believe the reason they act that way is because they feel a bit paranoid that the situation will become worse if they do not do so. And there's again a repetition of do's there. For instance, a person had to undergo a shortage of money, again another story. Logically, they will feel a little paranoid that at one point they might have to experience an empty pocket and had to live in the streets. Regarding that matter, they figured out a solution to improvise such situations by getting an extra or part time job. This solution will help them to gain extra money to pay their daily expenses, such as water and electricity bills. And this means that their problems are solved and they are now very free. Again, the same comments I think go for this paragraph too. This person shows a wide range of vocabulary again and a lot of different grammatical structures, but again, it's a little bit too exaggerated. But again, still really detailed, really organized, because it has two different paragraphs for two contrasting arguments. So it's good in that sense. And lastly, this person gives their opinion, saying, in my honest opinion, I strongly suggest that one can choose to act in both situations according to situations. When facing a problem, think of the best solution to solve it. If the situation requires you to simply ignore it, then just do so. There is no need in figuring out a way to improve those situations, as it will take up your time and cause stress. However, if the situation requires you to take action quickly, by all means do so, as you might not know what are the consequences if you ignore the problem. Again, there are a few grammatical mistakes, but what the person is trying to argue here is clear, right? This person says, we can do whatever we want depending on the situation. So if we can solve it, uh, we should solve it. If we can ignore it, we can ignore it, basically. And even though this person does not present one opinion as the chosen one, it's still consistent too, right? Because this person agrees with both of them, basically. And it can show that Both of the options can be good in different situations, and I'm convinced. And if the examiner is convinced, then it's good. You don't have to choose one side as your opinion. Any questions on this? Any questions on giving your opinion, for example? While you're thinking of those, let's read the conclusion. In a conclusion, the main important thing when facing bad situations is to analyze the problem, and then only you can react to them. Not all bad situations needs to be ignored, and not all needs to be improved. Think wisely to get the best solution for all of your problems. So basically, there are again a few grammatical mistakes here, but what the candidate is trying to say is clear. We can understand him or her, so there's no problem. But what do you feel like in terms of content? So, for example, throughout the essay, there are a lot of yous, right? And we're not actually talking to someone while writing an essay. So, using you is not that academic. Still, if you trust your essay that much, you can use you, but I'd advise against it. Now, another thing that we need to consider is that this essay is 497 words, which is really, really wrong, really long and wrong, because this person probably did not have time to correct these easily correctable grammatical mistakes. So, for example, not all bad situations cannot get needs, right? It should get need. So, if this person did not write this long, uh, he or she would probably have time to correct his or her mistakes. So this is an example of what not to do, not writing too long, because we have to correct our grammatical mistakes, those simple grammatical mistakes, because if we repeat them too much, then it will greatly affect our score. Now let's read the examiner's comment. So here, the candidate has addressed all parts of the task and shows a clear position throughout the response. Ideas are presented, extended, and supported, as we have talked about. The response is logically organized, and there is a clear progression throughout. The candidate has addressed all parts of the task and shows a clear position throughout the response. Ideas are presented, extended, and supported. The response is logically organized, and there is a clear progression throughout with a wide range of cohesive devices, such as based on, for example, however, hence, besides that, regarding that matter, this solution, this means that, and stuff like that, with only occasional awkwardness or error. Act in both situations according to situations, in a conclusion, which should be in conclusion. Each paragraph contains a clear central topic. The range of vocabulary includes some less common items such as fate, paranoid, and shows examples of style and collocation. Go with the flow, figured out a solution, problems are solved, my honest opinion. Occasional errors do not prevent the message from coming through. There's a range of grammatical structures, and these are usually accurate, although there are a few errors, such as some people chooses and stuff like that, as we have talked about. The meaning is still clear. There's a question on the chat box. Let's read that. Ma'am, do examiners ignore grammatical mistakes if the sentence makes sense? They usually tend to ignore it if the meaning is clear. But if it changes the meaning, or if you make the same mistake again and again, then they know that it's not a typo, then they know that it's not something that you do by mistake, but that is something that you do regularly, then it greatly affects your score. So, for example, a few mistakes like this, if some people chooses or not all bad situations needs, it's okay. But if you do them, let's say 8 out of 10 times, then that usually affects your score really greatly, basically. So they don't ignore it all the time. It kind of depends on the consistency of making those mistakes. If you do them consistently, then they usually take it into account. but if there are just a few of them, then you're good to go, if the meaning is clear. All right, any other questions about the essay in general, or two essays, band 9 or band 7, or discussion essays about the question? If not, I advise you to, again, as I've said this at the beginning of this class, I advise you to write an essay of about this topic, which would be really good practice since you now know a lot of different vocabulary. Let's say like put up with or other things that we've used, which I cannot remember at this point. Um, Hard done by, yes, definitely. Um, then you know these words now, so it would be really good practice to actually use them, because when you use a newly learned vocabulary, it actually sticks to you, so you can write it with more ease afterwards. Use stress, yes, definitely. Yes, Fairy, you have a question, I think.
Ma'am, will you take the test
Sorry.
for it? Will you take the test for the writing task?
Will I take the test?
Yes.
I'm not planning on it soon, I just took it.
Okay. Okay. Means you will take our test. I'm talking about.
So do you mean I will get your answers, your essays, and grade
Yes.
them?
Yes. Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
there's not that option at this point, but I will take that into consideration and talk with other teachers, and we will see what we will do.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, no worries. All right, then, if there are no other questions, I hope to see you next week, Saturday and Sunday, in speaking and writing sessions. But before you go, we have a document, a survey for you, where you can grade me and this class, which would be really good because your feedback really, really matters. And it's anonymous, so you don't have to be shy or anything. You can just write whatever feedback that you have on this class. And my name is Gizem. The survey will ask you with which teacher you got this uh, session. Thank you for the lesson. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am. This was a very informative session. Thank you so much. Thanks. Thanks for your good comments. Hope to see you next week too. And there are other classes during the weekdays too. You can join them on listening, reading, introduction to IELTS, whatever you want to take. And there are also libraries and other sources, resources on our Clasital web page. You can visit that too and learn more tips about more things. Thank you so much. Hope to see you. Let me unshare my screen. Thank you so much.